All right, coming up on this edition of Today's Verdict, a lawyer, speaker, and author who wrote a book about the legacy of slavery in America from the viewpoint of enslaved Africans and their descendants is here to talk to us about her new book. And the fight to raise minimum wage continues. We speak with an organization and a fast food worker on the cost of living in New York City. As you can see, we have much to get to, so stay tuned. Today's Verdict starts right now. All right, hello and welcome to Today's Verdict, the interactive show that gives you your legal rights and options. I'm your host and trial attorney, David Lesh. Today's Verdict is always encouraging you to stay connected. Make sure to tweet me at David Lesh and hashtag Ask Today's Verdict if you have a question. And check us out at bronxnet.tv. Deidra Moore worked as a public defender with the Legal Aid Society and then established her law office in New York. And now she is here to tell us about her recent book, From Me to You, The Power of Storytelling and Its Inherent Generational Wealth, an African-American story. Welcome, Deidra. I want to say it's Deidra Moore John V.A.
You got it, David.
I got it correct,
yes,
right?
Yes, you did.
And I want to show this book so everybody can, I don't know if anyone can see it. If you can see this book at this point. There you go. From Me to You. I love it. I love it. So excited. We know each other professionally and personally as well. So it's an extra benefit for me to have you on the show. And let's just start a little bit about the book. Where was the inspiration? Where did it come from?
Well, first, let me say, David, thank you so much for having me on this show and sharing your platform to
Absolutely.
share this book that I like to refer to as my labor of love.
Right.
And so what inspired me to write the book was, I like to say, leadership, friendship, and our youth. And David, you would understand when I say that a lot of that inspiration came from the spaces and places held within the Riverdale Country School, the school that my son attends. Right?
And just for the record, we both have sons at Riverdale, and we love the school, and I know they love the book, which makes me so happy.
Thank you so much for that. And in fact, they're using it as a part of the fifth grade course. So I so appreciate that, and I'm also grateful. So what inspired me to write the book is, as I tell the inspiration through our youth, I hope that the inspiration of our leadership and our friendship will reveal itself in that statement. So it was back in September of 2019 when my son, Justin, had occasion to participate in the Service Learning Club at the school, where they take the children into the community to help and show them what it is to engage and to engage in service to others, right? So on this particular trip, they went to the Hebrew Home, a nursing home here in New York State. And while at the Hebrew Home, they had the opportunity to engage a surviving Holocaust survivor. And while engaging the Holocaust survivor, they asked questions, they showed them where the branding was upon his body. But it was on the way back to the school bus where my son, Justin, and his 8-year-old peer, who happens to be a child of Jewish descent, they started talking to each other and sharing with each other what their families told them about the Holocaust and slavery. Now, these two 8-year-olds made a connection that adults don't do. And I was so inspired and impressed when I heard my son talking about how him and his peer were sharing with each other their respective knowledge about two complex topics. I was just inspired by our youth at that moment. But it was later that evening when I was getting Justin ready for bed, and he says, so Mom, so what's slavery really about? Oh my goodness, David. I thought it was too soon. Right. If I had on these pearls, I would have popped them. If I was on a chair, I would have fell over. Because I thought it was just a bit too soon, right? But what I said to him was that I'm going to make it a teachable moment for you. And I gave him some more information, of course. And what I did was I started searching my mind, my book resources, talking to other people who didn't really know what my thoughts were with respect to the question he posed. And I started realizing, you know what? I haven't found that book that really narrates this story, this complex story, a topic of slavery, the way that I wanted it narrated. I wanted it to not be traumatizing on every page. I wanted it to be accessible. And so what I did was I remembered a quote that a dear friend shared with the third graders when I had them. I was a part of the Parents of Color Committee at the school, and I created this Phenomenal People with Phenomenal Stories speaker series, and I invited some people of color to come to the school and speak to each of the grades. So the third grade had the opportunity to hear from Edgewood's Datakot, a dear sister friend, and she shared with them what it was that inspired her to write her first book, Crick Crack. And what inspired her was a quote by Toni Morrison. And that quote was, or that quote reads, if there's a book you want to read, but it hasn't been written yet,
write it.
Then you must write it, right? And I said, wait a minute, I couldn't find what I wanted, so here pursued my journey to start writing this book.
Well, tell the viewers a little bit how you lay it out, because it takes you from point A to point B to point C. It's very interesting the way you do it. Tell the viewers
I appreciate that. The book is laid out, it's one book, and it's 3 parts, I like to say. The first part of the book speaks to diversity of people. That's in chapters 1 and 2 pretty much. And I illustrate the diversity of people by talking about this thing called the country spotlights that we do at the lower school. And I connected our son to the family and friends that we have in different parts of the world, right? So that's chapters 1 and 2. But then chapters 3 through, I think it's 14, speaks to what I like to say is the who, what, when, where, how, and why of that complex topic of slavery. It touches upon those from exploration to colonization down through to the revolution.
Did you get emotional when writing this book? Were there times that you had to take a pause and get yourself together again? Because it's probably a very emotional read.
It really was an emotional journey, but somehow it was cathartic for me because it helped me to address or deal with the oftentimes pain that's associated with sharing the story, and to share it with an 8-year-old, you can imagine how much
now
more
you're
painful
saying
it
it's almost
was.
required reading in 5th grade, at least at Riverdale. Maybe it's some of the other schools it should be. What will students get out of the reading? What do you think they're going to come home and talk to their parents about? What do you think?
Well, for me, I think I would love it if kids will be inspired by hearing the stories of our ancestors and the lived experiences of our ancestors and how they gave of their blood, sweat, tears, and lives lost so that we can be free emotionally, physically, and mentally. It's about identity and self-worth as well. No matter who you are, it's important that you have identity and self-worth, because if you don't, it all goes for naught. Because to me, it's not just about having confidence and high self-esteem. It's about having identity and self-worth, because with that, you'll be able to enter any space and be able to repel naturally all the stereotypes, all the unconscious and conscious bias conduct of others. But when you have confidence and self-esteem, when you walk into certain spaces, when you're in that space, your confidence and self-esteem is gauged by who's in the room. They make you feel like you have a voice, you don't have a voice. So I want kids to walk away with having a sense of who they are, and to value the value of investing in yourself and learning about your history, because it all goes to making you that whole individual.
I think a lot of adults could learn from the book and investing in themselves. Would you agree?
I would leave that for them to decide, but absolutely.
Before we get into a little bit about your legal career, which I want to, where can we find the book? Because a lot of people are going to want to buy the book.
Thank you so much. Well, first, the book has recently been vetted and selected with the New York Public Library. So you can find it in the New York Public Libraries. You can also find it on my website, which is www.deidramore.com. It's on Amazon. It's in Barnes & Nobles. It's at the Lit Bar, apparently. Apparently is on Target. So
it's everywhere.
So it's been ranging. It's been spreading. It's out in India. It's being spread about in India after undergoing an interview with a wonderful woman named Hasina Parvin. It's hopefully going to be getting into the hands of Nabda Mandela, which is the grandson of Nelson Mandela, who's carrying forward his grandfather's legacy. So it's just spreading and reverberating throughout.
Let's shift gears a second, a little bit to the legal profession.
Sure.
As we slowly move out of COVID into back into the courthouse and the courtrooms, do you feel that we're getting back to normal, or do we still have a ways to go?
Normal?
Whatever normal would be considered
question.
for the law for Office of Court Administration. What do you think?
I definitely feel a return to seats in the chairs, or bodies in the chairs, as they coin that phrase. It's going to be a slow journey because it's interesting. I don't know how I truly feel about the fact that we can now e-file a lot of things instead of having to go into court. I'm happy about that because it saves on travel time to go e-file things. However, there are extra layers that come with everything that seems, what used to take one step now takes five steps. So I don't know how happy I am about that. But no, I do feel the system is getting back on track, having had the pause that we had to all take, and I think they're doing a pretty good job with, surprisingly, with still having hearings and conferences and things.
Now,
virtually.
I know you do matrimonial law, you do trust and estate work, mental hygiene law. We've met on Article 81 cases and stuff. What seems to be the farthest thing from coming back to normal for you? Is it the matrimonial hearings? Is it some of the Article 81 hearings? What would you say is taking a while to get back to where it's supposed to be?
You know, that's a fair question because I have a varied practice.
Yeah.
I don't just practice in Bronx. I practice in Westchester, Manhattan, Bronx, Brooklyn. I even have a case or two in Staten Island. And it seems that, and I also have a varied subject matter. And I say that because when there's a lull in one area, it seems the other area picks up. So while I've been doing a lot of guardianship matters via conferences, virtual conferences, I've also been doing estate hearings virtually.
You have?
As well, yeah, absolutely. In different boroughs too. But with respect to matrimonial, I'll say that kind of is on the slow end of coming back to where it used to be. I don't know what that's really about. Maybe it's because not many people are going to court or seeking attorneys to file their divorces. Maybe they're reconciling while they're in COVID. I don't know. But I would say matrimonial cases haven't had that increase.
You think you have time to write a new book, maybe?
Well, it's funny you say that because we're about to release a coloring and activity book,
Okay.
Along with an associated book, and hopefully that'll be out in the beginning part of the year, and then I'll turn my attention to possibly a novel that I have been setting my eyes on.
Should we give a nice shout out to Riverdale? What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. Riverdale Country School. I love it.
All good.
You know, all good. You know what I love about this school, this independent school, if I could say this really quickly, is that, you know, oftentimes people talk about the independent schools and they all start sounding alike in the very beginning. They talk about having the rigorous academic routine, about having a diverse and inclusive space, and they talk about their service to community, right? But what distinguishes Riverdale is more than the 27 acres of beautiful land that it rests upon. It's more than the 44% of the diverse population in the student body that we speak of. What it is that I so respect Dominic Randolph for his leadership effort in seeing value in infusing the sense of belonging in these academic spaces. Did you hear what I just said?
Yep.
Infusing that sense of belonging in these academic
I would absolutely
competitive
agree with
spaces. You understand? So, and so that's what I most love about the school. You know, I'm a then and now kind of mom. I had a daughter who graduated some time ago, and then we have our son who's here now. So
love it.
I kind of knew the Riverdale then and now. So I have a lot of respect and appreciation.
We're going to leave it there.
Yeah, we will.
It's been wonderful having you. Deidra Moore, John VA. I love saying the whole thing.
Thank you so much,
You'll come back
David.
another time and visit us, right?
I look forward to it. Thank you for having me.
All right. Well, at the height of the pandemic in 2020, many bank branches closed in the Bronx community. In order to raise awareness, the Bronx Financial Access Coalition held a series of tours throughout the borough. Our reporter, Sonji Lopez, attended one of them. Let's check it out.
From 2018 to 2021, 17 bank branches have closed in the Bronx. In response, the Bronx Financial Access Coalition held a series of tours throughout the borough in order to raise awareness. This tour took place on East Burnside Avenue, the former site of an amalgamated bank, which closed its doors in 2020.
Today we're here on East Burnside Ave in front of what was an amalgamated bank branch that's now a nail salon. So what we're seeing over the last few years, even before the pandemic, is a shift away from in-person relational banking we see a lot of the smaller banks closing branches and the big banks closing branches.
Their departure from the community was really deeply felt by the community, combined with the fact that the local Chase branch had been closed due to a flood in its branch here on Jerome Avenue. The community found itself without any commercial banks at all.
With the mission of securing a financial future for the Bronx Financial Access Coalition is focused on working together to identify solutions and alternatives to bank closures. Among them, a bank on wheels called the People's Mobile Credit Union and a future Bronx People's Bank branch, like this one on the Lower East Side. Community members got an opportunity to learn more and sign up here on Burnside.
I passed by, I was standing here, and then I noticed, on the table, it was talking like banking. Once I see the word community, I know it's a, inclusive thing for people in the community.
We know that there is need for the community. I think the biggest issue is trust. And so having the support of community members and community leaders has been very successful for us. So the unit is here. We can open accounts, we can open loans. We're looking to open a branch here. We want to stay in the community, we want to serve the community.
We're here today to really celebrate the Bronx People's Federal Credit Union, but also to, just encourage community members to not be resigned to branch closures, to really have their voices be heard.
A group of community members and elected officials rallied here to protest the amalgamated bank closure back in August 2020. The coalition, who has been openly opposing bank closures like these, spoke with local Bronxites about the impact and connected with elected officials to support and amplify legislation like the New York Public Banking Act.
That's one of the legislation that I am co-sponsoring wholeheartedly. I'm fighting for it, and of course, we're going to be in every place that we are talking about. How we're going to breach that generational wealth gap that we have in our community.
We have people going to check cashing places where we know they're going to take money out of the little check that they already have. So banking is absolutely necessary for this community.
On the 1st and the 3rd of the month, there's oftentimes people have to wait up to an hour just to access cash, which is necessary for certain neighborhoods. So, for example, if you do need cash just to do day-to-day transactions, we don't have access to banking. That has huge implications.
We deserve to have branches that are accessible, affordable, again, providing flexible products and services.
A new community bank will be coming to the Bronx in 2023, but for now, you can look out for the People's Mobile Bank right behind me. They'll be providing affordable and convenient financial services in a neighborhood near you. Visit bxfac.com or call the number on screen for more information. Reporting for BronxNet, Sanji Lopez.
All right, welcome back to today's verdict. I'm your host, David Lesh. We are always encouraging you to stay connected. Tweet me at David Lesh. A few days ago, we recorded via Zoom a conversation concerning legislation that would adjust the minimum wage annually. This would automatically respond to the cost of living, and this would give workers the wage increases they need rather than needing a new fight for each raise. Let's watch. All right, welcome back to today's verdict. I'm your host and trial attorney, David Lesh. We have two guests with us today, one by video, the other by just phone. Maritza Silva Farrell, the executive director at Align, is here, as well as a worker from Chipotle, Alyssa Roman. Ladies, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me here.
It's a pleasure. All right, let's start with you, Maritza. We're talking about minimum wage and, how the struggles that, certainly low-income workers find in our city to be able to really survive given inflation. Just it's a very difficult time for them. Could you maybe give us a little bit of a history of the minimum wage in New York and why it's so important that you think we should be making sure we have periodic raises in minimum wage?
Yeah, absolutely. I can give you a little history in terms of how we actually were able to increase the minimum wage 10 years ago to a historical number, which was 15. This happened about 10 years ago, a decade ago. Fast food workers in New York led the way when they walked out of their jobs demanding $15 minimum wage and a union from their employers. That specific campaign was spread nationwide and became the movement known as what we already know right now, the 5 for 15. I mean, we're really proud from the progress that was made back then. And we are going to keep on going. So actually, I want to share that this fight was led by all workers in the fast food industry back then, and it continues to be led by workers who are in the most vulnerable sectors of our economy. And we need to recognize that minimum wage increases. What they do is allows for workers to be able to have sustainable lives. That's the reason why this week we are coming back and we launched a campaign called Raise Up New York with a coalition of workers, labor unions, community groups, and responsible business that are committed to continue to ensuring that workers earn wages and they can have a life that they can thrive in.
I see, the bill was, came up through Senator Jessica Ramos, Assemblywoman Latoya Joyner, and it calls for annual minimum wage increases. How do you figure out the amount? I mean, what are you looking at? Are you looking at year over year inflation? How do you figure out the percentage that minimum wage should be raised up every single year? How would you do that?
All right, let's just go back to the basics, right? Like wages, sure. Let's just understand that right now are too low, particularly in the most low wage industries of our economy. And let's just point out that the industries that we're talking about are the industries from the workforce that sustain our economy through a pandemic. The same essential workers that we applaud for during the pandemic and we were like thankful to are the same exact workers that are getting paid low wages today. So I think just to start off with the point that workers don't have enough make enough to make ends meet. Right now, we are recognizing that there is a high cost of living. Rents are skyrocketing. If you go to the grocery store, you see 3 times more of what you were paying a year or two ago in groceries. So overall, the cost of living in New York is increased. And it's increasingly, and the issue is that it's no pairing with the wages on how much we're paying workers. In New York City, the minimum wage hasn't budged since 2018. So there has not been increases on the wages despite the cost of living increase. So that's how you manage the numbers. As a result, its value has already plummeted from more than 15% in value and will fall by more than 30% by 2026. Unless we have a legislation like the one that we're going to talk about today that allows for increases to happen accordingly to the cost of living as we see it happening.
Let's hear from Alyssa for a second. Alyssa, you're at Chipotle, am I correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And are you a full-time or a part-time employee?
Part-time.
And are you finding it difficult to make ends meet for you?
Honestly, it's very difficult. So when I first started working at Chipotle, I was living with my mother. I was a full-time student at the moment. My mom is a single mother, so I try to help her make ends meet as much as possible, especially that she's not working herself. So it makes things really difficult. And now I'm expecting my first child next month. And now I'm living in the shelter. So it's very, very difficult.
Do the other employees at Chipotle get together and talk about, the hope that minimum wage is raised up, that they could use it? Are these discussions that you hear when you're in the restaurant?
Sometimes people just act like they just tolerate it, They just kind of also make ends meet for their families or their own personal needs. So it's like, you have no choice but to just suck it up sometimes.
What's your biggest expense? Is it the food? Is it rent? Where is most of your money going usually that you find that you need an increase in your hourly rate? Where would it go to?
I mean, before I was pregnant, it was like more just helping my mom pay her bills and then like travel expenses because like a Metro card alone is like $123 monthly, just to travel back and forth to work and get back home safely. And now it's my daughter. You know, I have my daughter coming next month, so I have to like get everything ready for her: diapers, wipes, clothes, cribs, et cetera. You know, the normal basic needs for a child.
Maritza, let's get back to you for a second. You heard from Melissa. Are these the type of complaints that have become worrisome to you in terms of young women or who are pregnant or having a baby now, and they just need the help financially?
I mean, that's right. Like, and again, I mean, I want to emphasize that we're talking about workers who are essential workers and have always been essential workers. They are actually sustaining our economy. And this is the reason why we believe it is time for an increase on the wages. $15 is not enough any longer. $15 does not allow for basic needs, as we're hearing from the Chipotle worker. At this moment, we need to ensure that folks have a place to live. The cost of living in New York City is just way too high. Rent is way too high. So that's the reason why we are asking for an increase of $20 and more. The way we are setting this up just to address this problem at the moment is just to make it so that the state legislature pass a legislation that will increase to 2025 by 2026. And that way, the cost of living and the cost of the wages can increase in some level to be able to allow for folks in this important sector of our economy to be able to have the ability to make ends meet.
Well, it's a very important issue. We'd certainly like you to come back on and let us know how it's faring and whether you think you'll have that increase or when you'll have it. But we want to thank you very much, both of you ladies, for coming on the show and giving us some very important insight about the minimum wage.
Thank you, David. One thing that I wanted to also point out before we cut out that I think might be helpful for folks to know, that when we're saying we're wanting to increase the minimum wage for workers, there's not just one small section of the workforce. We're talking about over 2 billion workers across.
So many.
So that's another piece to make sure that we emphasize. And with this particular legislation, once it gets passed, we're talking about $2,000 annual raise increases for those workers.
Again, we want to thank you very much for coming on. All right, stay with us. Today's verdict has so much more.
Thank you so much, David.
All right, well, that's all the time we have today. I'd like to thank our guests for joining us and, of course, you, the viewers, for watching. If you missed any part of today's show, be sure to check it out at bronxnet.tv. Also, remember, if there is a legal issue or topic you'd like to see on a future edition of Today's Verdict, feel free to contact me at davidlesh@bronxnet.org or tweet me at davidlesh, and make sure to hashtag #AskToday'sVerdict. For myself and all of us at Today's Verdict, always remember, know your rights, know your issues, reach a verdict. See you in 2 weeks.